The people had chosen him in a landslide. Marcus Hadley, the charismatic senator from Pennsylvania, promised hope in a time when the nation teetered on the edge of collapse. His voice was steady, his eyes piercing. He spoke not to the mind, but to the heart, and the people followed. At first, it was the kind of following you might expect for a savior, but over time, it became something darker. Hadley's rise to absolute power was so gradual that most didn't notice, until it was too late. First came the suspension of term limits, justified as a measure of stability. He assured the nation it was temporary, a necessity during the unprecedented economic crisis. His supporters cheered, his critics whispered, and the whispers grew quieter as journalists vanished or recanted under mysterious circumstances. The faces of the disappeared appeared in grainy photos plastered on street corners, eyes hollow. Rumors swirled that they weren't dead, but kept somewhere, not as prisoners, but as something worse. His speeches became mandatory broadcasts, the kind that interrupted every channel, every device. The words he spoke had a strange cadence. Even those who hated him found themselves listening. People began repeating his phrases in their sleep, waking to wonder why the words felt so important. Psychologists reported a rise in sleepwalking and strange collective dreams of vast, empty fields under blood-red skies. Entire towns claimed they could hear Hadley's voice, even when their screens were off. The first open rebellion happened in the Midwest. Farmers armed with rusted shotguns and tools tried to storm a federal supply depot. They were crushed in hours, not by soldiers, but by each other. The survivors described an overwhelming compulsion to turn on their comrades. They said they heard him in their minds, urging them, convincing them. Some took their own lives rather than speak of it further. By the third year of Hadley's reign, no one could trust their own thoughts. People began questioning their memories, their desires, even their loves. Was that hatred for a neighbor truly their own? Was the loyalty they felt for the president natural, or something planted? Families dissolved into suspicion, with parents reporting their children for treason and siblings disappearing in the dead of night. Neighborhoods became ghost towns, every house locked and silent, every window a darkened eye. The Civil War wasn't fought with guns and armies, but with minds. Entire regions rose up, then fell apart from within, their leaders crumbling under the weight of Hadley's influence. Rebel broadcasts were erratic and strange, full of scrambled images and whispers too low to hear. Some said the rebels were trying to shield themselves from his power. Others claimed they had gone mad. Reports filtered out that rebel commanders wore helmets lined with lead, that they communicated only in written notes passed hand to hand. One woman, Lena Mercer, became a symbol of the resistance. She had once been a speechwriter for Hadley before defecting. Her voice carried clarity in a world drowning in his words. Lena spoke of how he had changed over time, how his confidence had morphed into an unshakable belief that he was destined not to lead, but to rule. She claimed he had discovered something ancient, something buried deep in the archives of the Library of Congress, something that had whispered to him as he read its pages. No one knew if she was right, but her broadcasts became lifelines for those desperate to remember who they were. Lena's final broadcast came late one night. Her face was gaunt, her eyes bloodshot. She spoke of the president's plan to unveil a nationwide synchronization, a broadcast so powerful it would silence every dissenting thought. As she spoke, her voice began to falter, her words replaced with static and fragments of Hadley's speeches. She stared into the camera, her mouth moving, but the words coming out were no longer her own. The feed cut to black. The synchronization began the next morning. The president appeared on every screen, his eyes blazing with the fervor of a prophet. His words were calm, almost soothing, and they slid into the minds of every man, woman, and child who listened. Some fought it, but they were few. Most let the tide wash over them. The silence that followed was unlike anything the world had ever known. In the end, there were no battlefields, no treaties, no winners or losers. The country became a single synchronized entity, its people moving in unison, thinking in unison. Somewhere deep in the White House, Marcus Hadley smiled, his voice echoing endlessly across the vast, empty fields of the collective mind. And in the endless, unified silence, the question no one dared ask echoed softly in the void. What have we become?